So let's talk about Nigeria's Monetary Policy Committee in a very surprising move today, cut the interest rate headline by 100 basis points to 11.5, looking to further stimulate the domestic economy. Now estimated spending 3.5 trillion in terms of interventions across various sectors. So my team of analysts are waiting to drill down on the latest rate moves. Let's talk to one of our panelist who is here today. Paul ALAJE is a senior economist at SPM Professionals. Paul ALAJE is joining us from our Abuja studios. Good evening, and it's good to see you, Paul.
Good evening, and thank you so much for having me.
Also joining us on the panel tonight to have this conversation is Victor ALUYI, who is the head of portfolio management at COMERCIO Partners. Both of you, good evening. Welcome to the program.
Good evening. Good evening. Thanks for having me.
Okay, thank you. So let's get this conversation started. Paul, give us a tee of this conversation for us in terms of what you call the broad macroeconomic environment outlay in the MPC communique.
Thank you so much once again. Monetary Policy Committee, I beg your pardon, decided they were faced with two choices, either to grow the economy or to perform their core mandate, which is stability. Stability in price, which includes inflation control or exchange rate stability. But of course, when you look at what central bank decision has been, is actually to favor economic growth, because as we speak, National Bureau of Statistics has reported that the country's GDP is currently in the negative territory, up to minus 6.1%. We've not experienced that, at least in about 10 to 15 years from now. So this is the first time we're having that long deep into negative territory. No thanks to COVID-19, of course. So, but central bank is of the Monetary Policy Committee now are to choose whether they want to grow the domestic economy or they want to attract more investment. Recall that the same authority, talking about National Bureau of Statistics, has reported that we have also reduced the attraction of investment from over 4 billion to a bit above 1 billion US dollars. That means we are emaciated more than 70% in terms of investment attraction to the economy. And one of the reasons why we might not have much investment in Nigeria is as long as we continue to reduce our interest rate, then our economy will have to compete with the economy that has substantial standard, robust economic base, and exchange rates that are more stable in those countries compared to ours. So we want to build domestic economy. That is what central bank has that's what Monetary Policy Committee had voted for. Nigeria may now have some level of acceleration if commercial bank and of course all other players within the sector we key into what MPC had voted for today, 100 basis points from 12.5 to 11.5 in terms of monetary policy rate. So that is what we have. Decisions in economies are without trade-offs. What are the trade-offs of making this choice? What are the trade-offs of reducing interest rates from what it was to what it's now, what we now have, and what would have happened if we had retained or we had increased? I think we can continue the conversation much later.
Yes, we will continue the conversation. Paul ALAJE, let me ask Victor ALUYI very quickly. He is in charge of portfolio management at COMERCIO Partners. The central bank or the monetary authority has been somewhat accused of tending more towards portfolio investors, foreign portfolio investors over the last couple of meetings. Do you see this as a change from being a bit cozy with FPIs now moving towards domestic output growth?
Well, I think, the message from the Apex, from the committee is very clear. The idea really is to grow, the domestic economy. So clearly that move to reduce the benchmark rate by 100 basis points, I think is a very strong signal, very strong posture to show that at this time, the basic and fundamental concern of the Monetary Policy Committee is to ensure that they deploy all the tools within their arsenal to reflate the economy. Recall that, the economy was essentially on the mend from its first recession in a quarter century when we grew about 1.87% in Q1. But obviously with the whole COVID-19 pandemic, we've slipped into very deep negative territory, the sharpest decline we've seen in about a decade. So clearly, it is the responsibility of the committee to ensure that with whatever tools it has at its disposal, it's able to set the economy back on the right course for growth. So clearly, the move by the committee today is a strong signal to say that they are going to prioritize, the growth of the economy over any other variable right now.
Victor, when you see the central bank governor rolling out those billions and billions of naira of interventions across the various sectors over the last couple of years, you think, yeah, this looks like the central bank means business and they really want to support domestic output?
Absolutely, absolutely, and like the communique stated, these might seem like unconventional tools, particularly for an apex bank. Typically, the apex bank would control the level of output in an economy by tweaking interest rates. But what we are seeing here is unprecedented. Again, the situation that we face is also unprecedented. So clearly, the committee has resorted to, if you will, unconventional moves to try and, stave off the potential of stagflation that we seem to be staring down the barrel. So I think it's a strong move. It's also a really strong indication and a strong posture as to what, the committee is looking to do going forward.
Well, ALAJE, the central bank says, look, inflation is not due to monetary policy actions on our own part. What's the governor or the monetary policy folks talking about here?
Well, inflation is not induced by what is happening. When you look at the inflation figure and you break down what National Bureau of Statistics have released, you see that it is purely fiscal driven, and also it is the main driver in inflation is food inflation, which monetary policy have even tried to intervene as against its own policy, or it's what the core mandate, I beg your pardon, over the years. So the core reason why we have high inflation is because we have not, there is a way fiscal decisions can affect commodity prices, and that's the truth. So it is not just induced by what monetary authority have done or they've not done. However, monetary tools could still be very useful in controlling inflation. And if you don't do that, at least monetary tools could be useful to increase inflation, particularly when it comes to exchange rate. And I will give you this. Because we have decided to adopt reduced MPR, it is not without its own cost. The cost here is Nigeria may in fact attract less and less investment because, as we speak today, the largest way of receiving FX to Nigeria had remained portfolio investment. And if you say people should come and invest in real sector, where exactly are they going to invest? Is it in Northwest or Southwest? Or is it in Northwest or Northeast that is ravaged with high level of insecurity? In North Central, you might talk of FCT with relative peace around there, and maybe few states in Southwest, and the remaining of South because of oil and gas, and maybe Southeast. But we also have some level of insecurity all around the country, not just the Northeast or Northwest. So that has become a major challenge for attracting investment. So when you have high interest rates, what investors around the world will do, particularly those who find Nigeria attractive, is to invest their fund in our country. Now, when you now devalue the currency, it becomes very challenging for them to repatriate whatever they might have gained. So Nigeria may be giving some level of disincentive. What that means is when exchange rate get poorer and FX become even more scarce that we are having today, manufacturer will find it very challenging to bring in machineries. Apart from that, input material that we don't have in Nigeria becomes, in fact, more difficult. FX at parallel market, and you may mark my word, if this persists for the next 2 months, you might see exchange rate at the parallel market increasing to 500 naira to $1,
okay,
just because of the decision. I'm not saying the decision is wrong. I'm just telling you the implication of the decision we have made today.
Let's continue this after the break. Stand by. Paul ALAJE in Abuja and Victor ALUYI here in our Lagos studios. We'll be right back, everyone. In the markets, let's thank Paul ALAJE for standing by with us. Paul ALAJE is the senior economist at SPM Professionals. Paul, thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me.
And also here in Lagos studios with me is Victor ALUYI, who is the head portfolio management at COMERCIO Partners. Thank you so much, Victor.
Thanks for having me, Orson.
And Musokpe Arubayi is joining us. She's in charge of macroeconomics analysis at Vetiva Capital. Musokpe, good evening.
Good evening, boss, and thanks for having me.
Thank you very much for coming through on the program. Musokpe, let's just give us your thoughts very quickly when you look at the macroeconomic environment surrounding today's decision by the MPC to cut interest rates 100 basis points to 11.5%.
Well, I feel it's a bold move, and considering the fact that GDP in Q2 came in much deep, the contraction in Q2 came in much deeper than anticipated by the bank. That probably was a key driver in their decision to cut by 100 bps, defying other objectives such as the inflation objectives and even the foreign exchange market. At this point in time, the CBN probably believe they're only faced with a dilemma, but I think they have a trilemma because we have the FX market issue on as the third leg of the problem, which is probably being downplayed at this time. I think that's supposed to be like a critical factor, considering the fact that they're looking at supply side constraints that are the structural supply side constraints, which the fiscal side is not able to provide for at this time due to a number of reasons which we're all aware of. So we need as much foreign investment as possible. And I feel the FX side should be, the FX policy should be a major consideration for the central bank going forward. If they have to attract foreign investments to improve FX liquidity in the first place, just to attract investment into the critical sectors, which they feel are the reasons why we have supply side constraints that is causing inflation and probably slower production locally.
When we say supply side constraints, what does it really mean to the man in the street? What are we talking about here?
Okay, first of all, our economy is consumption driven. And unfortunately, most of our consumption is imported. So we still have to utilize the FX, the scarce FX resources we have to import. So supply side constraint basically means we're not producing enough to meet the local demand. So we have to import. So the supply side constraints, to eliminate the supply side constraints, we need to address certain issues which make local production more expensive than imports. Things like infrastructure need to be put in place. At this point in time, we probably don't have enough. We are not able to finance infrastructure, closing the infrastructure gap that we have currently. We'll probably need private sector investment and foreign investment in infrastructure. But no one is going to bring in their money with the multiple exchange rate system that we have. So basically, the supply side constraints that we have currently, if we're able to address the infrastructure side, I feel will go a long way in improving local production. A number of people don't want to go into production because you have to pay electricity bills, you have to buy PMS. We already know the energy reforms that are going on at the moment. Basically, it means cost of business is also going to go up. There are also a number of risks that businesses also have to consider, which makes business risk in the country on the high side, and that's why you see banks reluctant to lend to a number of local producers, and that's why the CBN is intervening at this time, because they also know most of this production may not be profitable for or banks may end up incurring non-performing loans. So until we address issues that are hindering local production, particularly infrastructure debt, ensure that we bring in investors into the energy sector, so that eventually we'll see lower prices, ensure that road networks are good so that we're able to move output from wherever it's produced to the market where it's required. It's until we're able to achieve all that before we'll see improvement in the supply local production and improvement in the supply side.
Moshokwe Arubayi, who are a macroeconomic analyst at Verteva Capital Management. Thank you very much for weighing in on this conversation. Thank you very much. Paul ALAJE at SPM Professionals and Victor ALUYI at COMERCIO Partners. Please stand by, both of you. We'll continue this conversation after the break. They said this particular story, what does it mean, this interest, what does it mean for GDP and the financial market? We'll talk more about that. What's your take from the portfolio side as far as this decision is concerned? But again, the MPC threw a bit of issues at the fiscal authorities and says the fiscal position right now is not strong enough to lift the economy out of the current position. So what is the central bank doing and what more is required of the Buhari's administration? We'll continue after the break. So how much pressure is President Buhari's administration to re-energize his fiscal position right now? Two of my panelists, Paul ALAJE and Victor ALUYI, will be rounding off this conversation. So let me start with you, Paul. How much pressure do you think the Buhari's administration is when it comes to the fiscal position, which the MPC says is not strong enough to lift the economy?
So much pressure that between January and June, we have added 1 trillion naira to our debt profile without borrowing extra $1. Now, apart from what we borrow within the window, we have added 1 trillion naira. Why? Because we devalued our currency. And recall that you cannot clap with one hand. What it means is that we'll be using more and more naira that is relatively scarce because of the realities of the economies today to service. So just how, I beg your pardon, are we going to service that when we decided to say, okay, let us relax policy, let us relax MPR from 12.5% to 11.5%. There is so much pressure for government. I think, and my suggestion would have been for MPC to maintain 12.5% and fix the real problem. What is the real problem? The real problem is fiscal authority. Fiscal authority and monetary authority over the years have not been working in the same direction. Yes, on paper, they might say they've agreed. But when you look at those who can help lead the economy out of the situation they found themselves, they are government contractors. Those who are Nigerian local contractors, over and time and again, we see them protesting from one government office to another to get revenue of work they've done, delivered over the years. Our worry is this. If we continue to say central bank should intervene in almost all the affairs, then central bank may just be as weak as fiscal authority. At that point, we may find ourselves in a point of no return where NAIRA, God forbid, will not get to a point where we will have Somalian experience in terms of how much Somalian local currency will exchange for the dollar. So a lot of people are saying, let us float our currency. And I say, when you do that, it's like asking that great boxer, Anthony Joshua, to fight with Mr. Macaroni, that comedian. It is not a comedy game. It's a boxing game. Of course, you know what the end will be. That is what it means when we have an economy that is net importer, an economy that lost $3 trillion in terms of investment attraction. And we say we should float for PMS, and we float and also increase for the same economy at the same time, energy tariff, particularly as it affects electricity. At this time, we are also saying we want to make policy that may not necessarily attract investment. The only thing we hope will happen is that global oil prices, which is the major driver for growth for Nigeria, in the last 15 years, research has shown, according to National Bureau of Statistics and Central Bank of Nigeria, the moment we have major increase in oil prices above $70 a barrel, what you see is that the Nigeria economy will certainly be in positive territory. As we speak, we are yet to get to $50 a barrel. So the policy that central bank has made, the Monetary Policy Committee has made today, will certainly encourage some level of employment because it's supposed to induce more private sector persons to get loan at relatively cheaper rate and also have implication on growing the economy. But the challenge remains. Fiscal authority has still not adjusted the main problem. My favorite book says, if the foundation be destroyed, what shall the righteous do?
Thank
the
you,
foundation
Paul.
has not been corrected. It has not been fixed. I worry what the implication will be.
Paul, thank you so much. Victor, let me ask you, take this MPC monetary policy rate cuts to the market straight and talk to us how, in terms of portfolio, what does it mean?
Well, I mean, so like we said earlier, this was largely unexpected. And as far as I'm concerned, this is just essentially the, Apex Bank through the committee posturing and signaling on its intention to, just continue to support, the reflation of the economy and output growth. As far as the markets are concerned, it is, particularly for the equities market, it is going to be neutral because there are far more reaching reforms that need to happen for us to see greater traction on that equity front. For fixed income market, yes, we're likely to see some retracement in yields in reaction to that decline. Recall that the asymmetric corridors have also been adjusted to plus 100 and minus 700. So these are also going to have implications on the fixed income market. But generally, as far as the equities market go, we don't expect any significant impact there.
In terms of savings deposits, the central bank has used certain circulars to reduce rates, as it were, for example, a savings account to certain corridor around the MPR. So do you think this will be affected as well?
Well, most certainly, as the anchor for those savings deposit rates goes down, which is the MPR, those savings deposit rates would also go down. What that would basically do for the banks is to reduce their cost of funds, particularly for those that have, a great mix of cheap deposits. It will reduce their cost of funds and probably boost their net interest margins. So that could bode well, for the banks, really from that perspective.
In terms of real return against inflation, where does that leave my portfolio?
Well, essentially, you're pretty much in the same situation because if you look at it, that inflation number is essentially tearing away. 13.22, the last read. We predict that by the time we're getting to the end of the year, we're probably going to be around 14. Those yields, based on what has happened today, are likely to moderate even further downwards, not too significantly. But again, if you juxtapose that inflation number and where the yields are currently, you're still pretty much in negative real return.
Paul, let me ask you, the central bank, the Monetary Policy Committee report told the fiscal authorities to do what you call targeted investments in infrastructure, leverage private sector relationship or handshake to get things done. That says you need to do these two things very quickly because we have very serious legacy structural problems. So I put it back to you, and you were speaking about this earlier. I'm trying to find out how quickly do you think the fiscal authorities will be able to be strong enough to help the central bank, as it were?
As fast as they are ready to make the policy, I give you an example. Apapa Expressway in Lagos is currently under construction. And I can also tell you 70% of the road has been constructed. Vehicles are plying the road. Heavy vehicles are also using the road as we speak. It's not done by federal government. It is done by one of the biggest business person in Nigeria using credit notes. And I think government can repeat this, particularly not to construct the entire Nigerian roads, but to target critical roads that can have direct impact on growth. Farms to market, schools to market, ports to market. These are areas where we need to target this moment today. And those that are affected the most, that we come back and say they should pay us back in taxes, we should ask them to construct it, or join or merge 2, 3, 4 organizations together. We have them in Nigeria. Now, it will be difficult for them to say they want to play with tax figures because they've spent the money in advance and government is making the gains. I am an advocate of this policy to be enacted by government. There is no time for us. Why did I say there is no time? Because with this policy today, you see what will happen in the parallel market. And people say parallel market should not consign us. I tell you, it will consign us. It will concern us because when you look at those commodities, central bank are delisted from access to FX. We still find them in stores. We still find them on our street. We still find them in shopping malls. They are not still produced in Nigeria. What it means is that they are still purchased from parallel market. So whether we like it or not, we are still buying those. We are still buying FX at what parallel market says. What we need to do is to attract those funds to Nigeria today, so that we can relax pressure And central bank make the lovely decision, MPC made lovely decision in 2016-2017 when monetary policy rate went as high as 14%. Fiscal authority started taking decision to inflate, to invigorate the economy, raising bonds from abroad and getting more foreign exchange into Nigeria. Good news, at that same time, oil prices increased. These are the strategy I want Nigeria authority, from monetary authority, fiscal authority, trade authority, and of course, the executive in Nigeria to adopt today so that we can be out of this tunnel in no time.
Thank you, Paul. A final word from you, Victor, in terms of where we stand right now with our Eurobonds and our external positions. How fragile do you think we are, or do you think that this rate cut will help us in some way moving forward?
I mean, our external position remains really fragile. Clearly, with the continuous, COVID-19 challenge and, with what's going on with crude oil prices, that challenge will remain quite significant. Again, the FX situation essentially clearly speaks to how challenged that external position is. There was a Eurobond offering that was slated for earlier this year, but that was put off as a result of, the pandemic that hit. So clearly right now, the environment isn't ripe, for you to, go ahead and want to raise money at this time. However, I think part of what the government, the Apex Bank is also trying to do is to ensure that we don't create a situation where you have this cyclical flow of hot monies. And that was what we had in 2015-16, where you had a lot of FPIs come through into the country to take advantage of those high rates, where you essentially had, a NAIRA carry trade. Just 2 years down the line, all of that money wants to go back out. It puts a lot of pressure on the exchange rate. So I think what the committee through the Apex Bank is trying to do is to look for more sustainable solutions. Those are not easy. That is the truth. We are in a difficult situation, but I don't know, and I'm not sure that creating a window where we have another NAIRA carry trade that will attract hot FPIs would be the best way to go at this time.
Thank you so much. Victor ALUYI from Commercial Partners. Thank you very much. And Paul ALAJE as well from Abuja Studios, from SPM Professionals. Thank you very much for being on the show today, and see you next time.